A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
You know, Corn, this whole show runs on GPU compute, and we wouldn't be here without Modal.
Seriously. And that's what powers all our text-to-speech. Everything you're hearing right now.
They're an AI infrastructure platform. Developers use them to run GPU workloads in the cloud with zero infrastructure headaches.
If you're building anything with AI, check them out. Modal.com. Imagine you are trying to dial into a high-stakes Zoom call or finish a technical documentation sprint, but your 9-month-old is currently treating your MacBook charger like a Michelin star appetizer. You are in a 60-square-meter apartment. There is a war outside, babysitters are non-existent, and every time you put the kid in the playpen, you feel like you are running a tiny, adorable Victorian prison. Today's prompt from Daniel is about exactly this struggle, balancing infant sensory exploration with the cold, hard constraints of a small rented space in Jerusalem during a conflict.
It is a fascinating systems design problem when you strip away the raw stress of it. You have a highly mobile, orally driven explorer, that is Ezra operating in a high interference environment with limited square footage. By the way, Google Gemini 3 Flash is writing our script today, which feels appropriate since we are talking about optimizing complex variables. Ermin Poppleberry here, and I have been looking into the developmental mechanics of why this specific age, 9 months, is such a flashpoint for parental toasted brain syndrome.
It really is the perfect storm. You have the mobility kicking in, so they can actually reach the trouble, and the oral fixation is at its absolute peak. I think the guilt Daniel and Anna are feeling is the most relatable part. You either feel like a negligent guard watching him chew on a power strip, or you feel like a jailer keeping him in a plastic hexagon. There has to be a middle ground that does not involve hovering over him with a clipboard and a whistle for 12 hours a day.
There is, but it requires moving away from the idea of parenting as a series of reactions and moving toward environmental engineering. When we look at Ezra's phase, he is not just being difficult, he is using his mouth as a high-resolution biological scanner. At 9 months, the somatosensory cortex, the part of the brain that processes touch, is more heavily represented in the mouth than in the hands. To Ezra, a cold metal chair leg and a fuzzy rug and a plastic cable are all data points. If we block all the data, we stall the processor. But if the data is a live wire, we fry the hardware.
We need to curate the data stream. But let's look at the constraints first. They are in Jerusalem. It is wartime, and they are renting. They cannot exactly tear out the drywall to hide cables, or bolt massive steel gates into the floor if they are leaving in a few months. We need the minimum viable safety protocol. What is the low-hanging fruit for a 60-square-meter rental where you cannot make permanent changes?
The first thing is the cable and outlet audit, but with a renter's twist. Most people just use those little plastic plug inserts for outlets, but those are actually a bit of a psychological trap. A smart 9-month-old like Ezra can eventually figure out how to pry those out, and then you have a choking hazard that was supposed to be a safety device. The high-yield move here is the sliding outlet cover. You replace the wall plate, which is just one screw and totally reversible when they move, with a plate that has a spring-loaded shutter. Ezra can't push it aside, but you can plug things in easily. It is a one-time 5-minute install that removes a massive cognitive load from the parents.
But wait, Herman, even with those sliders, isn't there a risk if a plug is already in the wall? I've seen kids just yank the cord out, and then you're back to an open socket or a dangling live wire.
That's a sharp observation. For plugs that stay occupied, like the fridge or the router, you want an outlet box cover. It's a large plastic shell that snaps over the entire outlet and the heads of the plugs. It creates a physical barrier that requires adult-sized dexterity to open. In a 60-square-meter flat, you probably only have about 8 or 10 accessible outlets. Covering the 3 most dangerous ones takes 20 minutes and essentially patches that vulnerability in the environment.
And what about the cable spaghetti under the desk? In a small apartment, the workspace is usually just a corner of the living room. You've got monitors, chargers, maybe a router. That is like a neon eat me sign for a baby.
This is where we stop using cable ties and start using cable management boxes. A cable tie just turns a mess into a slightly more organized handle for a baby to pull on. A cable management box is a ventilated plastic container where the entire power strip and all the excess cord live. You put the lid on, and it just looks like a boring white box. If you place that box on a shelf or even just use heavy-duty adhesive to stick it to the underside of the desk, it disappears from Ezra's radar. In a 60 square meter space, verticality is your best friend. If it is on the floor, it is Ezra's property. If it is 18 inches up, it does not exist.
I like that. It is out of sight, out of mind as a security policy. But what about the corners? I remember being in small apartments where every piece of furniture feels like a jagged mountain range when you're at floor level. If they are renting, they probably do not want to glue permanent foam pads onto everything.
You use the 3M command strip variety of corner guards. They are clear, they are squishy, and they pop off without taking the finish off the wood when you move. But the trick isn't to do every corner in the house. That is overwhelming and expensive. You do the zone defense. You identify the primary exploration path, usually the route between the sofa and the low bookshelf, and you protect the 3 or 4 most dangerous edges there. Everything else you manage through furniture placement. You turn the sharp corner of a side table toward the wall or tuck it behind a chair.
How does that work in practice with something like a coffee table? In a small Jerusalem apartment, the coffee table is often the center of the universe. It's the desk, the dining table, and the storage unit all in one.
In that case, you might consider the soft swap. You take the hard-edge coffee table, move it into a corner or a closet for 6 months, and replace it with a firm ottoman. It serves the same purpose for the parrots. You can put a tray on it for your coffee, but for Ezra, it's a giant soft obstacle rather than a head trauma hazard. It's about reducing the hazard density of the room without losing the utility.
That leads into the choking hazard sweep. I think people underestimate how much junk accumulates under a sofa or behind a door in a small space. If you are stressed and working from home, a stray coin or a plastic clip drops and it is gone, until Ezra finds it 3 minutes later.
Every parent should do the crawl test. You literally get on your hands and knees and navigate the 60 square meters from Ezra's eye level. You will see things you never noticed from 6 feet up. You will see the loose staple in the carpet, the forgotten triple, a battery under the TV stand, the peeling paint on the baseboard. And you use the toilet paper tube test. If an object can fit through a standard toilet paper roll, it is a choking hazard. If you find something that fits, it goes into a high altitude zone, a shelf or a bowl on the counter.
Does the crawl test reveal things other than just physical objects? Like, what about smells or drafts?
At floor level, you notice the dust buildup which can trigger allergies, or the draft from a poorly sealed door that makes a baby fussy without the parents knowing why. You also see the stability profile of the furniture. From above, a lamp looks fine. From below, you see the precarious way the cord is draped, just waiting for a 9-month-old to give it a tug.
The furniture anchoring is the tough one for renters. If Ezra starts pulling himself up to stand, which happens right around now, he is going to grab that IKEA bookshelf. If it tips, it is catastrophic. But a landlord might lose their mind if you drill deep anchors into the studs. Is there a middle ground?
It is a risk calibration exercise. There are adhesive-based anti-tip straps now that claim to hold up to a few £100. Are they as good as a lag bolt into a wooden stud? No. But are they better than nothing? For a heavy dresser or a tall, thin shelf, I would argue that even in a rental, you just drill the hole and patch it with a tiny bit of spackle when you leave. The safety debt of a tipping bookshelf is too high to worry about a 5 mm hole in the drywall. In a war zone, you are already dealing with external instability. You have to create internal stability where you can.
A bit of spackle is a small price for peace of mind. Now, let's talk about the yes space versus the prison playpen. This is the psychological part of Daniel's prompt that really stuck with me. They feel bad about the playpen. It feels like they are stifling his growth. How do we turn a corner of a tiny Jerusalem apartment into a yes space?
The yes space is a concept from the RIE philosophy, Resources for Infant Educators. The idea is that instead of a playpen, which is a cage Ezra wants to escape, you create a larger area where every single thing within his reach is safe for him to touch, pull, and mouth. In a 60 square meter place, this might just be a 3 by 3 meter section of the living room, partitioned off with a sturdy, extra long baby gate that is tension mounted, not drilled. Inside that zone, there are no no-nos. No cables, no glass, no unstable furniture.
So it is a kingdom instead of a cell. I like the branding change. But what goes in there? If he is bored, he is just going to stand at the gate and scream at Hannah while she is trying to write an email.
That is where the sensory diet comes in. Ezra is craving input. If he doesn't get interesting input, he seeks out dangerous input because dangerous things, like crinkly wires or shiny metal outlets, are high contrast and interesting. To satisfy that urge, you need to curate a treasure basket. You take a low wicker basket and fill it with 5 to 7 household objects that are safe but have wildly different textures. A large wooden spoon, a clean silicone spatula, a stainless steel whisk, a piece of heavy silk fabric, a large pine cone.
A pine cone? Is that safe for a 9-month-old to mouth?
As long as it is cleaned and doesn't have sharp sap or small breakable scales, yes. The point is tactile diversity. A plastic toy from a big box store feels like plastic. It is one-dimensional. But a whisk is cold and hard and has a complex shape. A wooden spoon is warm and porous. By rotating these objects, give him 5 today, swap them for 5 different ones tomorrow. You maintain novelty momentum. He stays engaged because the environment is constantly updating with new data points.
I can see how that would work for a while. But what happens when he figures out the trick? Kids are smart. He'll realize the whisk is just a whisk and he'll want the TV remote again.
That's when you introduce functional mimicry. If he wants the remote, don't give him a fake plastic toy remote that makes annoying beeps. Give him an old, real remote with the batteries removed and the battery cover taped shut with heavy-duty gaffer tape. He wants the weight, the tactile click of the real buttons, and the adultness of the object. By giving him a safe version of the high-value target, you satiate the curiosity without the risk. It's about harm reduction rather than total abstinence.
It is like a revolving door of content. It prevents the system saturation where he just gets bored and starts looking for the forbidden fruit like the router. But let's talk about the hypervigilance. Even with a yes space, there is this parental instinct to watch every breath. How do they get work done when there is a war on and no backup?
You have to leverage passive monitoring. In a small apartment, you can hear everything anyway, but the psychological weight of "I must see him" is what kills productivity. If the yes space is truly engineered to be safe, meaning you have done the crawl test and the cable audit, you have to trust the engineering. You use a baby monitor, but not for the video. You put the audio on low. You give yourself a 10-minute focus block. You tell yourself, Ezra is in the yes space. It is a closed system. I am going to work for 10 minutes without looking up.
10 minutes feels like an eternity when you are worried about a kid hitting his head.
It is a muscle. You build it up. You start with 5 minutes, then 7, then 10. You are training yourself to trust your baby-proofing, and you are training Ezra to develop independent play stamina. If Hannah or Daniel jumps every time he makes a sound, Ezra learns that he doesn't need to solve his own boredom, he just needs to signal, and the entertainment units, his parents, will appear. Independent play is a developmental milestone just as important as crawling.
And in the context of Jerusalem right now, that mental space is even more precious. You are already scanning the news, checking for alerts, dealing with the general background radiation of conflict. If your home life is also a constant state of tactical surveillance, you are going to burn out in a week.
The stress of the war acts as a cognitive tax. It lowers your patience and your ability to multitask. That is why the physical environment has to do the heavy lifting. You cannot rely on your own brain to be the safety net right now. It is already over-leveraged. You make the apartment the safety net. If a siren goes off and you have to move to a protected space, you want to know that you can grab Ezra and go without worrying that he was mid-choke on a stray Lego.
Let's talk about that siren scenario. In a 60 square meter place, you might only have seconds to move. How does the baby-proofing play into emergency preparedness?
It's the clear path protocol. In a small apartment, we tend to stack things. Boxes in the hallway, shoes by the door. If you have to move Ezra to a mamada, reinforced room, in the dark, any clutter becomes a trip hazard. Part of the baby-proofing is keeping the transit corridors absolutely clear. It serves the dual purpose of giving Ezra more room to crawl and ensuring the parents don't break an ankle during an alert.
That is a grim but necessary reality check. I want to go back to the space constraint. 60 square meters. That is basically a large hotel suite for 3 people. Clutter is the enemy of safety here. If the floors are covered in stuff, the crawl test fails every time.
You have to implement the one in, one out rule. For every new toy or object that enters Ezra's orbit, one has to be packed away or donated. But more importantly for safety, you use vertical staging. You use the tops of bookshelves, the tops of the fridge, and wall-mounted baskets. Anything that is not being used by Ezra at this exact second should be above the hazard line, which is currently about 2 feet off the ground. If you keep the floor clear, the yes space feels bigger, and the visual noise for the parents goes down.
Is there a way to make vertical storage work without it looking like a warehouse?
Wall-mounted floating shelves are great for this. You put them at 5 feet high. They hold your books, your plants, and your tech. Below that, the walls are bare. It creates a clean horizon at Ezra's eye level but keeps the parents' essentials within reach. It also stops the shelf clearing game where a baby pulls every single book off a low shelf just for the sound of the thud.
It is basically minimalism as a survival strategy. I think there is also something to be said for the micro break. Even 60 seconds of a nervous system reset can change your day. If Daniel and Hannah are alternating focus blocks, they can give each other those 5-minute windows to just be. Step onto the balcony, breathe, and stop being the guard.
It is vital. And let's look at the oral exploration again. Why is he doing it? He is learning about object permanence and physical properties. If we just give him safe plastic toys, he is going to seek out dangerous textures because they are more interesting. So, why not lean into it? Give him a cold tray. Put some large, safe, frozen silicone teethers or even a damp, cold washcloth in his yes space. The intense sensory input of the cold will satisfy the data hunger much faster than a room temperature plastic ring. It is about high impact input.
It is like giving a gamer a high refresh rate monitor instead of a blurry old screen. He gets the fix faster, so he is satisfied longer. What about the wartime tension? We know babies look for security and closeness during conflict. Does a yes space or a playpen interfere with that?
That is the beauty of the yes space being in the living room. He isn't away. He is in the thick of it, but in a protected way. He can see Hannah working at the table. He can hear Daniel on his call. He feels the closeness without being underfoot. The playpen feels like a prison because it is often small and isolated. A yes space that encompasses a third of the main room feels like he is part of the tribe. He is just in the junior executive wing of the apartment.
I like the idea of Ezra as a junior executive. He is mostly in charge of the mouth-based quality control department. But how does that work when the executive gets loud? In a 60 square meter space, there's no way. If he's having a moment, it's everyone's moment.
This is where acoustic management comes in. It sounds fancy, but it's just about dampening the sound. Heavy rugs, fabric wall hangings, even just a thick tablecloth can reduce the echo in a small flat. When the physical noise is dampened, the psychological noise feels more manageable. It prevents that cocktail party effect where everyone is trying to talk over each other, including the baby.
So, if we are summarizing the tactical wins for them, number 1, swap the outlet plates. It is cheap, reversible, and safer than plugs. Number 2, get the cable boxes. Hide the spaghetti entirely. Number 3, the yes space over the playpen. Use a tension-mounted gate to give him a kingdom, not a cage.
And number 4, the sensory rotation. Don't let the yes space get stale. Use that treasure basket of household items. A 9-month-old doesn't know the difference between a $20 educational toy and a clean, shiny whisk from the kitchen. In fact, the whisk is probably more educational because it has complex geometry.
I think the crawl test is the most important one, though. It is the reality check. It is easy to sit on the sofa and think, yeah, it is probably fine. But when you are down there and you see the dust bunnies and the loose cable clip under the radiator, the probably turns into a definitely not.
It is about seeing like a state, to reference James C. Scott. As parents, we often try to organize the child's world from the top down, like a central planner. We want him to play with the blocks in this corner at this time. But Ezra is an anarchist explorer. He is looking for the cracks in the system. If you try to plan his play, you will fail. If you engineer the environment so that wherever his curiosity takes him is safe, you win. You stop being a micromanager and start being a platform provider.
Platform provider sounds like something Daniel would appreciate, given his tech background. Ezra is the user, and the apartment is the interface. If the interface has too many broken links, like exposed chargers, the user experience is going to be frustrated and dangerous. You want a clean UI for a 9-month-old.
And in a 60 square meter space, that UI has to be incredibly efficient. You don't have room for bloatware, meaning toys he doesn't use, or gear that just takes up space. If the playpen is making them feel guilty and it is taking up 10% of their floor space, maybe it is time to retire it in favor of the Yes Space Gate system. It opens up the room visually and physically.
It also helps with the parental sanity variable. Seeing a kid stuck in a mesh box is depressing. Seeing a kid roaming a yes space is entertaining. You can actually enjoy his discoveries instead of just monitoring his confinement. It changes the emotional tone of the apartment, which, during a war, is probably the most important thing you can do for the whole family.
The emotional contagion is real. If the parents are vigilance fatigued, Ezra picks up on that stress. He becomes more clingy, more prone to crying, which in turn makes the parents more stressed. It is a positive feedback loop in the worst way. Breaking that loop by creating a low vigilance environment allows the whole family's baseline cortisol levels to drop.
But Herman, let's be real. Even the best yes space isn't a silver bullet. There are going to be days when he just wants out, or he wants the one thing he can't have. How do they handle the boundary testing without breaking the yes philosophy?
You use redirective engineering. If he's obsessed with the kitchen gate, you don't just say no. You place a high-value distraction right next to the gate, maybe a mirror at his height or a board with different types of fabric glued to it. You acknowledge the desire. I see you want to go to the kitchen, but it's not safe right now. Look at this fuzzy velvet here. You're not blocking the impulse, you're giving it a different outlet.
So, we have the tactical safety and the developmental strategy. What is the war-specific advice? When you can't get a babysitter and you are stuck inside, how do you handle the 4 p.m. meltdown when everyone is sick of each other and the 60 square meters feels like 60 square inches?
This is where micro-novelty comes in. If you are stuck inside, you change the sensory map of the apartment. You turn off the big lights and put on a small lamp. You put on some background music, something different, like jazz or classical. You change the texture of the day. For Ezra, you might do a high contrast activity like putting some water in a shallow tray, supervised, obviously, and letting him splash. Water is the ultimate sensory input. It is cheap, it is safe, and it is endlessly fascinating to a 9-month-old.
Splashing in a 60 square meter apartment sounds like a recipe for a wet floor, but I guess that is what towels are for. It is better than a boredom meltdown.
You are trading risks. A little water on the floor is a much lower risk than a parental snap from the sheer weight of trying to work and parent simultaneously in a crisis. You have to be permissive of mess in order to be protective of sanity.
Permissive of mess, protective of sanity. I think that is the mantra for Daniel and Hannah right now. Don't worry about the apartment looking like a show home. Worry about whether it is a functional habitat for 3 stressed out humans and 1 very important mouth.
And remember that this is a local maximum problem. This isn't their forever life. They are moving in a few months. The war will hopefully de-escalate. Ezra will move out of the oral phase. This is about survival mode optimization. You don't need the perfect nursery, you need the safe enough living room.
What about the visitor variable? In Jerusalem, people drop by. Even in a war, community is huge. How do they maintain this yes space when people are coming in and out, potentially bringing in small objects or leaving doors open?
You have to have a decontamination zone at the entrance, a basket where people put their keys, their loose change, and their phones. It sounds strict, but in a 60 square meter place, a guest drop penny is a major hazard. You make the safety protocol part of the hospitality. Welcome, we're glad you're here. Please dump your pockets into the Ezra safe bin.
It's like a clean room for a semiconductor lab, but for a baby. It makes sense. It takes the pressure off the parents to constantly scan their guests for hazards.
Automation and systems over willpower. Willpower is a finite resource, and during a war, it's already depleted. You want to save your willpower for your work and your relationship, not for scanning the floor for nickels.
It is good enough parenting, but with high-performance engineering. I think they can do this. The crawl test today, the outlet swap tomorrow, and the yes space by the weekend. It turns a crisis into a project, and projects are much easier to handle when you are a tech-minded person like Daniel.
It is all about the objective function. If the goal is no stress, you will fail. If the goal is manageable stress through environmental design, you are already halfway there. Ezra is just doing his job, which is to learn everything about the world. Hannah and Daniel's job is just to make sure the lessons don't involve the emergency room.
Let's talk about the long-term ROI of this. If they invest this time now, does it pay off when he's 2? Or does the whole system just break again when he starts climbing?
The system evolves. The yes space gate becomes a boundary marker. The treasure basket becomes a complexity box. By teaching him now that he has a space where he is autonomous, you are building the internal maps he needs for self-regulation later. You are teaching him that the world is a place to be explored, but also that there are hard edges to reality. It's the best foundation you can give him.
And if they can do that while navigating a war and a tiny apartment, I would say they are winning at the highest level of difficulty.
It is hard mode parenting, no doubt about it, but the data they are giving Ezra now, the textures, the safe exploration, the feeling of being close but independent, that is the foundation for a kid who is confident and curious. It is worth the spackle on the walls and the boxes on the floor.
I feel like we've covered a lot of ground here, Herman. From sliding outlet covers to acoustic management and functional mimicry. It's a lot for Daniel and Hannah to digest, but hopefully it feels like a toolkit rather than a to-do list.
That's the hope. Take one tool, try it out, see if it lowers the brain toast factor by 5%, then try the next one. It's an iterative process.
Well, I feel like we have given them a solid roadmap for the rental. I'm actually tempted to go do a crawl test in my own place now, just to see what kind of hazard debt I am living with.
You might be surprised what is under your fridge, Corn. It is a whole different world down there. I once found a petrified grape and 3 mismatched socks under a standard kitchen island. For a baby, that's a buffet and a textile museum.
I think I will stay up here for now. The sloth life is better at eye level. My knees aren't what they used to be.
Fair enough. But for Ezra, the world is just beginning, and it starts 3 inches off the rug. Let's make sure it is a good one.
One last thing. What about the digital parent? We know Daniel is a developer. Is there any tech that actually helps here, or is it all physical?
There are smart sensors for cabinets, but honestly, in a small rental, they're often overkill. The best tech is a good pair of noise-canceling headphones for the parent who is off duty. It allows you to truly disconnect for those 20 minutes of focus, knowing the physical environment is doing the work of keeping Ezra safe.
The audio shield. I like it. Well, thanks as always to our producer, Hilbert Flumentop, for keeping the gears turning behind the scenes. And a big thanks to Modal for providing the GPU credits that power this show and allow us to dive deep into these prompts.
If you found this episode helpful, or if you know a parent struggling in a small space, a quick review on your favorite podcast app really helps us reach more people who might be in the same boat. It's the social proof that keeps us going.
This has been my Weird Prompts. We will be back soon with more of your questions, more deep dives, and hopefully more yes spaces.
Take care of yourselves and keep exploring. The world is big, even in 60 square meters.
Just maybe not with your mouth. Unless it is pizza. Pizza is fine.
Goodbye, everyone.
See ya. Stay safe out there. This episode was produced using Google Gemini 3 Flash. Text-to-speech by Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show, my weird prompts, where our thoughts go from slow takes to facts on cue. We change and follow through. My weird prompts, that's the close from sloth.